studio tonight is Mr. Emmanuel Bombande, Executive Director, West Africa Network for Peace Building. Good evening, Mr. Bombande.
Hello, good evening.
Thank you.
Nice to be with
And
you.
on the phone, we have a journalist who is on the ground and want to remain anonymous, but he has been there since day one, and he's going to tell us what is going on the ground. For the sake of the program, we're going to call him Kweku Amponsa. Kweku, are you there?
I'm live online.
Good evening. How are you doing?
Fine, thank you.
Good. Can you tell us, can you take us through the sequence of the story so far?
Yeah, last Wednesday, a Muslim youth were undertaking some offloading of goods at the municipal hospital and got himself electrocuted. So his colleagues rushed into the emergency ward, and there they claimed that the nurses on duty demanded a folder, the victim's folder, and possibly his national insurance health ID card. And according to the nurses, the victim had already passed on, not knowing to his colleagues who brought him to the hospital. So they took offense of that, alleging that the nurses were unprofessional in their duty. And following that, mortuary men were going around to collect dead bodies. There was a lady, an old lady, who was also bitten by a snake and died. She was also lying at the emergency. So when these two mortuary men, who are people from Hokwe, they are indigenous, went to collect this dead body, these Muslim boys thought that they were also coming to carry their dead body, and according to their faith, their corpses are not put in the morgue. So they attacked these two mortuary men. They sustained head injuries, and the caused some damages at the hospital. And after that, how will I say? Hello.
Yeah. Let me ask you this.
Yes.
There are fears that violence might erupt again tomorrow if the chief's regalia is not returned. What are you picking on?
Today we had the president of the Volta Regional House of Chiefs visiting the area. He met the two parties, the Hokwe Traditional Council and the Muslim community at separate functions. But the traditional people, the Hokwe traditional people, are saying that yesterday they gave an ultimatum which will end tomorrow. They said that they should return the regalia that was taken from the Togigans palace during the vandalization of the palace. So this is what they have said. But after the visit by Togbe Afede to the Muslim community, they passionately appeal that they should give them some time to enable them look for the regalia. You know, most of the people have also fled the area, and the information we have is that most of them are in Jasikan, KJB, Yakuye, and Sando. So the spokesman for the zongo community today appealed to Toby Afede to ask the Benin Traditional Council to give them some time to enable them pass this information to their compatriots who have fled the area. So that is about the regalia issue.
But Kweku, what are the chances that this regalia mystery will be solved tomorrow?
I think that when Toby Afede asked for time for the Muslim community to look for the thing, look at it, it was taken by the people of the Hokwe.
So how critical is this to the people of Hokwe?
Yeah, they claim the regalia it symbolizes the embodiment of the and authority of the area, and they wouldn't allow that particular aspect to be in anybody's hands. So they passionately appeal to the Muslim community to make it available for them to agree on the processes of peace building and other issues about making.
And how is the curfew? How is the curfew? Since it has been breached twice already, how is the curfew?
Now, I think everybody is observing it after announcement on the local resistance for everybody to abide by. We haven't received any incidents again after, I think, yesterday.
And also, we understand the Zongo community is a ghost town. Do you know if they will start returning since the chief have called them to return back to Hokwe?
Yes, the Volta Regional, the president of the House of Chiefs, Toby Afede, and his entourage, including the Volta Regional Minister, Henry Ford Camel, and the dignitaries visited Jahasekan this evening to appeal to those there to return to their homes.
And do you think Hokwe will return to normal as it used to be when peace is restored?
Yes. Now I would say that the only impediment has to do with the regalia. As soon as it is returned, I think that the both parties will begin. And the regional minister says that he's constituting a committee to look into the impasse. So I think that with time, peace will be restored and Hokwe will come back to normalcy.
And do you know if this incident has impacted the other communities around Hokwe?
Yes. The curfew, for instance, it's not only in Hokwe, it extends to Hokwe and its environment. So, this the corridor here links the region to the northern region. And most of Yam and other food stuff, this is a corridor for cutting it to Accra and other places. So they have also been affected in a way. The economic activity has been at a standstill. I would say that it is only today that we've seen that majority of the shops have been opened.
And do you see any other hand, maybe mercenaries coming out of the area, coming in, contributing to this violence? Do you see other people coming outside of the community, coming in to help with this violence? Do you know that?
I heard that, but I was not able to verify it. Yes.
Okay, Kweku, thank you so much for joining us, and have a good night.
Good night.
Yeah, it's day 4 of the Hokwe violence clashes. Clashes erupted from the exhumation of an imam. As we speak, there is heavy military presence in Hokwe. Togbi Gabusu has given until tomorrow for the return of stolen regalia. Over 2,000 people are displaced since the outbreak of the violence. The curfew is still in place, but it has been breached twice already. President Mills and Nana Akufo-Addo, they are yet to speak to the clashes. The country has recorded violent clashes in Tamale, Tishegu, Bemoba, Ekumfi, and Oblogo in the past 3 weeks. Parliament yesterday summoned the Interior Minister in camera to speak to the clashes. Tonight, we look at how these violent clashes have been managed so far. Have the solutions worked? Must there be a change in game plan? You can reach us with your thoughts on 1760 on all networks or post them on our Facebook wall. Mr. Babande, let's come to you. How did we get to where we are today?
Thank you. I want us to start this discussion from the positive note and the good stories of Ghana, yes, and then respond to your question in the context in which we are. 2 days ago, on the 12th of June, and 12th of June is my birthday, so it's always a special day.
Happy belated birthday.
Thank you so much. The Global Peace Index was released. The Global Peace Index is the best measurement of the peacefulness of a country. Out of 158 countries worldwide, Ghana is the 50th.
50th, okay.
So we are 50th on the Global Peace Index. And the Global Peace Index aggregates key indicators, the Corruption Index, the Mo Ibrahim Good Governance Index, and then looks at issues of crime, internal conflicts, aggregates all that to score the different rankings. And we have done very well. And secondly, I would not give the details, but this year, Ghana is awarded a major peace prize in Africa. But because it will be announced, I will not disclose the details, except that because I'm interconnected in the field of peace building globally, I happen to have the prior knowledge. The reason why I answer you beginning with this positive story is to say that we must maintain our focus on the bigger picture. Yes. In doing so, we must understand that in every country, there are social tensions. Yes. And social tensions are bound to happen because we are human beings who live in communities and must coexist. And in so doing, whether it's in the family home, whether it's in a village, or whether it's in a town, even amongst the two people who love one another so much as a couple, there will be social tensions. And once in a while, these social tensions can escalate. The question now, and I think you asked your question properly, why do we allow these tensions to escalate to the point that we are seeing? And I think there are several reasons for that. And to that extent, we must be reminded that whereas as a nation, we are doing very well, part of our challenge is that we are complacent and we take peace for granted. And many people have spoken to that topic. Secondly, we are not tolerant enough to appreciate that when these tensions, so to speak, exacerbate, when they lift up a bit, the way you solve it is not with the type of anger that we see demonstrated on the streets by young people. Because the issue is not the problem, though the problem always is identified as the issue. The challenge for the people of Hohoi today is how are they able to overcome this social tension that has, so to speak, increased. Whereas these are very trivial, you can then move into identifying the major fault lines. In all the media reporting and the way and manner we talk about these issues, and since Hohoi is at presently the town in focus, we refer to one another as divided people. For example, we talk
political lines, or when you say we refer to one another as divided people, is it on political lines?
You can identify that to be one. In other words, political polarization has come to be part of us. But I don't see that to constitute a danger yet. It's just a matter of, because the politics too sometimes has its beauty. Because sometimes we over-exaggerate the polarization in a negative manner.
Is that where we went wrong, or?
I wouldn't point it there. I don't think the political polarization is necessarily where we went wrong. Though I admit that the political polarization sometimes brings its own social tensions. Yeah. But I'm looking at, even in 2008, I remember on Oxford Street, I saw MPP people dancing on one side of the street and NDC people dancing on the other side. And they were having a good time and crossing over and embracing one another. So even at the level of our political divide, there are good stories about how we are a nation. And sometimes we are over-exaggerating also the divide. For me, I begin with the social.
Is that the reason why we didn't see it coming? If we over-exaggerate the divide, is that the reason why maybe we are complacent, we didn't see it coming?
It could be that we think social tensions only happen from a political problem. But the politics aside, we are bound to have other issues.
Issues, yeah. Because this is not,
It's
as
not
far as
pol-
we know, it's not
it's
political.
not politics.
But isn't it possible that our security apparatus should have at least have a hint of it? Because I don't see how these things can just blow up just one day out of nowhere.
The security agencies, they are as effective as the communities are able to bring to their attention what is wrong. When you have a fault line of conflict, and that allows a trigger, and from the journalists you were talking with, there was a trigger. Now, the police cannot know that when young people are carrying another young man who is electrocuted to a hospital, that can lead to violence. And there's no intelligence that can be able to detect that.
So does it mean this can happen in any other community?
It can happen in any other community.
Yes, in the spur of the moment.
In the spur of the moment as a trigger. The challenge now is, what is it that makes that trigger to produce this type of violence? And if you look at the story behind your coverage and your colleague that you were talking with, Hohoi is divided from what is described as indigens versus Zongo people. So who are the Zongo people and who are the indigens?
But I think we have Zongo in my hometown we have Zongos.
But that's the problem. It is not the terminology, but it is the attribute that we have in our perception about who are those who are in the Zongo and who are those who are not. And that fault line is what now makes the trigger for us to see ourselves differently. Let me frame it another way. If somebody from Hohoi who lives from a Zongo community is applying for a Ghanaian passport, and you are filling the form, you put your hometown. Are you going to put in your hometown column, I'm from Hohoi Zongo, or I'm from Hohoi?
No, but I think when we say Zongo,
yes,
it's just what do you call it? French people say quartier. It's part of the town. So if you live in Zongo, I think you are from Hohoi.
Let's have the courage in this country to admit. You see, when you say le quartier, for example, le quartier for me, I live in Bachona.
A suburb.
Yes.
Yeah,
so
a suburb.
If I live in a suburb, the suburb has a name.
Yes.
And that name is like for the residential area in which you live. And in the house numbering, you can go to the person's house. But we all know that the terminology Zongo community refers to a community more than just a suburb. We all know that Zongo means the people who are predominantly Muslim and by association do not belong to that area, and for that matter are settlers.
I think I agree with you to a certain extent,
okay,
but I don't think it's that in every community.
Okay. And I understand the difficulty in how this is framed, but that's precisely why we have to engage in the type of dialogue in Ghana that begins to change our perception of who we are right up to where we live and how we relate with one another. But the point I'm making is that the moment we begin to look at ourselves from town to town, we are already divided when we use certain phrases and certain terminologies. And depending on which town, it can be much more reinforced than the other. For example, I think in the Swedru area, we have a similar problem as we have in Hohoi.
Aguna Swedru.
Okay. In which the understanding that it doesn't matter whether or not in the ethnicity you come from that town or not. By virtue of the fact that you live in what is called a Zongo community, the perception about you is different.
You are labeled.
Exactly.
Okay. Mr. Bombande, before we went on break, you were saying something about how we see our own brothers and sisters who live in the Zongo community. If we can continue with that.
So I'm using that as only one level,
Yeah.
which is at a community level. Maybe we can give other examples. But let me quickly, on that point, emphasize that for those who live in the Zongo communities, they relate with the others who are the indigenes from the perception that I do not actually belong. And for that matter, when there is a problem, I have to relate to the others, knowing very well that this is where I am. So I am not at this point pointing any finger to anybody in the Zongo community, or for that matter, anybody that we call a settler. But I'm pointing to a fault line in our Ghanaian society, in our social fabric. And what is that fault line? We are very good at celebrating what is it that is different about us rather than what is it that unites us. So it's very easy to relate with one another as you are from the north, or you are from the Ashanti region, and you are from maybe you are a Ghana. I think one of the things we must do is to celebrate our Ghanaianness and reduce. Of course, we all come from 10 regions, and I'm not trying to be naive or run away from the fact that there's something good about the fact that we all go back to our villages and towns.
Yeah, I agree.
But the point I'm trying to make is, and I'm trying also not to compare us with other countries, what is it that makes us to quickly relate to who we are in our small enclave rather than who
being
we
Ghanaian.
are as a Ghanaian?
Yes.
We are 24 million people. Let's celebrate that Ghanaianness more. And we can only do that when we deliberately engage in the type of peace education that makes everybody to have that sense of the Ghanaianness. So that when there's a problem, the fact that we have all understood ourselves as Ghanaians makes it easier for the problem to be resolved. But we can continue the way we continue. The difficulty now is that when a trigger exacerbates a social tension, it immediately mobilizes people based on the cracks of who we are in the divide.
But you know what? As a country, do you think it's time for us to question our security apparatus? The reason why I'm saying this is it about a year or two ago when they said we are recruiting people into our armed forces. I don't know whether people picked on that. We are recruiting people into our armed forces and from region by region. And some people had issues that maybe there is one tribe, they dominate the military. Then I was asking someone, so let's say if I'm from Tamale originally. My parents are from Tamale. I was born in Kumasi. I'm from Kumasi. Or are they going to label me that I'm from Tamale if I decide to enlist in the military? We did not pick up on that. And I think it's something that we should look at.
You provide a good example. You provide a good example. And people will want to look at your name.
And associate it to one particular region.
Exactly.
Which is not right.
Which is not right, because you might have that name, but you were born completely in a different region.
Yes.
For example, I know people who have northern names, but they have no association at all with the north, because they were born in a major town somewhere in the south, and probably never even went back to where you might call them their root in terms of association. These are all, for me, the fault lines that we have to pay attention to and begin to appreciate what does it mean to manage these social tensions in view of the new contested areas that, so to speak, challenge our coexistence. Another way to put it is, we live every day to be able to manage our diversity in such a way that by being diverse does not mean we should allow social tensions to generate to the point in which we begin to see ourselves differently rather than who we are as Ghanaians. And that is where we should start from.
Already your organization I think you have 14 hotspots already. That was before this recent incident. But if within 3 weeks, what is going on from Ekumfi to Aflao? Is it an emerging trend, or?
Let me quickly say that for the purposes of efficiency particularly in the work that we are doing in an election year, we try to narrow down in our early warning system to have a close monitoring of areas that we consider to have peculiar problems, and because there are political undertones related to the deep-rooted issues of conflicts in those areas, we monitor how politics could exacerbate those tensions,
yeah.
so that we are able to be much more at the level of advocating for the type of engagement in those areas. And it is for the purpose of that early warning that we have those 14 areas that you talk about in Ghana.
Yes.
But I will confess that we ourselves conceptually do not want to describe a place as conflict prone.
Yes.
Because when we do that, we stigmatize and stereotype that area. And it now gets to a point in which when there is a problem there, then the people of Ghana say, oh, but are you surprised? But let us take it from the appreciable observation that every part of Ghana can have a violent eruption, to the extent that every part of Ghana has some form of what I have described as social tensions.
Yes, yeah.
But some parts of Ghana are less prone to violence because there are other driving factors for peace that moderate how those conflicts can escalate. And because we are in a conversation, whether we like it or not, and this morning I made an allusion to that, when the Keren Otu for Ashantehene sat on the throne of Asanteman, one of the policy issues traditionally he engaged on was to withdraw all cases of chieftaincy that were pending in the courts and to begin a process of dialogue and mediating those conflicts. And you have immediately seen that the social tensions around chieftaincy in Asanteman have reduced. So that is what you might call a deliberate understanding of those issues and the type of steps that were taken by somebody in traditional authority to mitigate them.
That's leadership.
That's leadership. And so in each region, what is it that is available to be able to drive peace and, if you would call it, bring now the issues of conflict to be submerged under those drivers of peace. So then the case study of Asanteman could then apply to what you do at the traditional level. And so there is right there a lesson, precisely because when you send a chieftaincy conflict to the court, the judge has no option or no choice but to make a ruling in which there is a winner and there is a loser.
Yeah.
But our people traditionally do not relate to winner-loser when it comes to traditional issues.
Yeah.
If it is land, they talk about the land in terms of the ancestors. Are they going to go home and tell the ancestors that we lost?
So does it mean, are we changing as a people, or we are just becoming intolerant?
Let me put it this way. There are more and more challenges that automatically bring us to deal with more contested issues that we did not deal with before. Straight away, our population is growing. And so the issues of land.
But 24 million, if it's correct, compared to other countries with more people. But the Ghana I know when I was growing up, I don't think it's the Ghana today. So does it mean we are changing? But you mentioned that we are growing.
I'm not going to deny that we are changing. But before, I'm trying to establish what could inform how we are changing. And basically what I'm trying to suggest is that we are dealing with much more contested issues than before. For example, the impact of climate change is making grazing land more scarce for people who used to move around very easily with cattle.
Yes, yeah.
And people are now cognizant of the fact that our crop lands have to be protected. Whereas in the past, you could grow crops and still have vast lands that were empty for grazing. And so there's a contested issue now between agriculturists and pastoralists. And that is the issue. But we have refused to deal with that as the problem. And we have chosen to deal with it as pastoralists being one ethnic group.
Why have we chosen not to deal with it? Not to look at it from that standpoint?
Because we are not
complacent?
We are not allowing enough space for deep conflict analysis. Because in the heat of the events, we do not allow, because in all the work that we do, in all the mediation work that I do, you cannot be good at bringing people to talk and reach a settlement when those people have not done a contextual analysis of their conflict to appreciate and understand where did we allow ourselves to reach the point that we have reached.
Is it fair to say that we have leadership vacuum in this country?
I wouldn't
because
say that.
If we are not, no, but if we are not dealing with issues that are affecting our communities, within 3 weeks, if from Hohoi to Tamale to Ekumfi, please, in any country, people will be scared.
You see, we are talking here.
We are not exaggerating.
You see,
because you saw the pictures.
In fact, even in the beginning of your program, you mentioned that the president and the leader of the opposition did not talk.
They haven't.
But they shouldn't. They shouldn't be talking simply because.
No. That I disagree. Here we are.
Yeah.
There's conflict going on.
Yeah.
Ekumfi.
Yeah.
People were attacked.
Yeah.
Because of lack of information.
Yeah.
Look at what has happened in the Hohoi. It has some religious connotations.
Yeah.
This is the time we need our leaders to talk to us and tell us that everything is going to be fine.
Let's put this in perspective.
You are not a politician, but this is something that we need them to come out and talk to us.
You see,
to address us.
Okay, let me respond
to comfort us.
Let me respond to you. It's not about talking, but it is about when to talk. I am not saying that because I did not finish my statement.
Yeah, okay.
I am not saying they shouldn't talk.
Yeah.
But if they talk at the wrong time, they can make the situation worse. Do you know that depending on a statement that the president can make, it can exacerbate the tensions?
No, just when we say we expect our leaders to come out and talk to the nation, it's assuring us. It's not choosing sides.
Okay.
It's assuring the people, I am in charge. Okay. Everything is going to be fine. Just like a mother or a father who have crisis in the home.
Okay.
If you don't talk to your kids, they will look at you like, hey, daddy, what's going on?
Okay, and now, to be specific, that is why today the chairman of the Peace Council talked. So what you need to do in the position of leadership is allow those heads of institutions and those institutions responsible by our laws to engage on what is happening. And when the return to normalcy occurs, the leadership now comes and pronounces on the promise of the future. But if in the middle of the pictures that you were showing, the very top leader is also there trying to find his way around, then you add more to the confusion. What is relevant today, and you talked about the 4 days, is the restoration of law and order. And so what is happening now?
But right now we have over 2,000 refugees outside Hawaii.
No, they are not refugees. We call them internally displaced because they have not left Ghana.
That's a fancy name. We're just trying to be diplomatically correct. They are.
Yes.
And they are seeking refuge outside of their abode.
Yes.
They are refugees.
And the institutions of the state responding to that are NATMO, the police, the National Peace Council has already indicated what needs to be done. But let's take it that next week, the restoration of law and order starts to give confidence. You are now able, and I'm talking about, because you made reference to top leadership, you can now begin to engage on the promise of how we must live peacefully.
Yes.
But if you do it at the wrong time, then the appropriate time for you to make that pronouncement becomes, so to speak, a point in which there's no value again in what you say. And it's, by the way, we are talking about the context of Ghana. But it's not only Ghana.
Yes.
For example, let me think of very quick examples. Maybe what is easy for people to appreciate would be maybe the United States. Mm-hmm. In many of the issues where the tensions were boiling to a certain point, it is the agencies of the state who first manage this, and the president is then debriefed. Then Obama now will come and make the type of assurance to the nation that things are in order.
So you think 4 days is not long enough for leaders to at least say something about it?
I don't want that to be the center of the debate, but I'm just trying to tell you about the processes that is engaged. Because do not forget that what is happening now is to be able to restore law and order, protect lives, and protect property. That is a security operation.
Yes.
And it's only after that has happened that we can begin to talk about peace. Yes. You see, you don't go now and talk about peace. When the truth of the matter is there is anxiety, there is fear, and there is tension.
Now let's talk about solutions. Let's talk about violence erupts in a community, police respond. Now there's curfew. A few people are arrested, and then what?
Now, first of all, when the violence is a mob action, the initial arrests that are normally done would be on the basis of helping to restore law and order. But the moment you begin to subject those individuals to a law court for the purpose of prosecution, you begin to realize that how you prove that though you are arrested, that person was behind the violence begins to fall apart, precisely because it was a mob action. And that's why it's often too late because the mob action makes people to be irrational. And again, it's not peculiar to us. It's in the UK, in the city of London, they almost burned down the whole city. But the difference there is that because of circuit cameras almost all over the streets, those cameras were able to capture the faces of people, so you could zoom in on the face and use that in court to get prosecution. We don't have that. And that is why, if you relate to other conflicts that happened, we are fighting hard against the court system for not having jailed people, when we forget that in the court system, it's about the evidence that is empirical. And so you might have seen the person as part of the mob, but there's no proof that that person is the one who did the killing. And people now get angry that the police have not done their work. It's not because they've not done their work, but it's because in our system of a rule of law, the processes of allowing how you prosecute people caught in a mob action are much, much more difficult than when it is just an outright crime in which the person was apprehended.
Yeah, but now we have opinion leaders. They are meeting on Hohoi, and we have eminent people meeting as well. But yet there's no concrete solution. As I said, to use your own words, there are over 2,000 people who are misplaced now.
No, don't say there are no solutions. You are talking about 4 days. Do not forget that we should be happy that between the leaders, and for the lack of a better terminology, I would also be calling it the way we call it for now. But I would wish that in future we change the way we. So let's take it that in the context of Hohoi, the key leaders from the zongo community and the traditional area, they've started sending signals that are positive. The Muslims are saying that we'll bring the regalia. Now, what is a solution? A solution is not necessarily a settlement. A settlement is something that is tangible, that you say, this is the solution. But in conflict, solutions are the processes that lead to the settlement. And that, for me, is a positive signal. And the traditional people, in their own response, you see, when there's conflict, people want to save face. But they are also, so to speak, reciprocal in the way and manner they are handling this. And the regional minister, the regional security council, our impenufor in that area, including traditional leaders, are all engaging. And I hope, and we all pray, that the issue about regalia is immediately solved, and then we can get to a next stage. But because there is fear and tension, understandably 2,000 people will not like to sleep home. But that is what conflict does. It triggers that type of situation that we do not want. And yet it could be worse.
Before we go on, let's read some text messages from our viewers. Osei Ofusu says, we need to pray for our mother, Ghana. Hetape Christian, young Atu, was the chief regalia stolen or burnt? That we will hopefully will find out soon. Yeah, Mr. Bombande, let's continue this discussion with everything. We are on solutions still. With everything that is going on, is it because Ghana will lack the political and moral will to deal with matters like this?
You ask a very pertinent question. As at one point in our preliminary conversation, I talked about complacency.
Complacency, yeah.
We have an attitude in Ghana in which we think we are immune to conflict.
Yes. Why is that?
So we need to begin by appreciating that conflict exists in every society. As a matter of fact, the contradiction is that in many Ghanaian homes, people will admit that there is conflict. But then when you now look at it at the larger society, we pretend that we do not have conflicts. Let me give you a very interesting scenario. In 2007, a delegation from Kenya came to learn from Ghana how we were establishing the National Peace Council. They went back, and they have since gone 10 leaps ahead of us, because they have a functioning National Peace Council with a well-established national secretariat for the council, with an early warning mechanism integrated into the council. And every morning, government officials, private sector, you in the media, just by the click of a mouse, you are able to monitor through social media, through various platforms, what is happening in each corner of Kenya. But they came to learn from us. And in Africa, many countries have learned so many things from us. They went and adopted them, and they are efficient in their implementation, and we just simply take our time.
Maybe
That is our problem.
We should go back and learn from them now.
Yeah, technically speaking.
Yeah.
There is a lot. In fact, I will even suggest our Peace Council to go to Kenya. And look at how. So, and on top of that, they have produced an elaborate national policy for peace building and conflict management. We don't have a national policy for peace building and conflict management. Yes, but that does not mean we have not made steps. We have made one step, and it's important for people to understand that there was political consensus, beginning with members of parliament, political parties, for the establishment of the National Peace Council by an act of parliament, Act 818, and the president has assented to it. But we are now deploying it. And so it is not yet fully functional. Because it does not exist in the regions and not even at the district level. Because if we had the Hohoi District Peace Council, I was not home. I was not in Ghana when these events happened. But from the debriefing I got, a few days before this escalation, there were situations that definitely pointed to the fact that violence was plausible. The District Peace Council could have immediately said, what is happening? Come and let's sit down and talk.
And deploy the security people
even the dialogue in itself. And where then you need the security.
Clothes,
exactly.
Security,
because there were stories about contentious issues over where to bury. So those things were there. And somebody even said, this is about the third time we have a repeat of this in the Hohoi district. So then the District Peace Council would have convened that type of dialogue. And we would have not been in the situation we are in now. But you see, and that is the difficulty people like us have. Because when we work to prevent conflict, people are like, but Bombandi, since it did not happen, how do we know that you have worked? But when it happens,
then they recognize what you're doing.
Exactly. And that's why these days, I don't want to pick my telephone call at 6 a.m. because somebody wants to speak on radio with me about the conflict. Because at that point, it's no longer relevant. So, sorry to use your platform to make that announcement. I have refused to be speaking early morning on radio stations because I don't want to be reactive to what has happened. I want to be working in complementing the state from the civil society space, in complementing media, in complementing other stakeholders for us to prevent. But not to be part of commentary when violence has escalated. So we must change our attitude and invest in how do we prevent. And that is why, in order not to be complacent, we must invest in the social capital of the Peace Council and let it function. Both at the level of human resource and at the level of financial resource. For example, if today they want to go to Hohoi, what funding pays for the transport for them to sit down with people and meet, since they don't have a budget line for that, and they have no district peace council, and they have no regional peace council.
That is very interesting, but hold that thought. Let's get our viewers involved, and we'll come back to that.
Okay.
Benjamin Kirkori, he says, "Oh God, save Ghana from violence before, during, and after the 2012 elections." Sylvester Daiwul Lugu, "Ghanaian must be wise and stop those violence because we have no place apart from Ghana." Gerard Onyikechi, "What do you want Mills to do?" Tano Mark, "The Bible said as a man thinks in his heart, so is he. If politicians are so reckless and declare war on innocent Ghanaians, why wouldn't Ghanaians be seeing these conflicts? When we begin to think positive, so shall it be. Why must the president be asked to speak? He is the #1 citizen of the land and so must not rush to speak." Richard Odro, "We have to think twice and stop this violence. We have to be double-minded and stop this negative thinking. Our leaders do not think about Ghanaians. They fight on their own. We young ones should find our way out." Usi Boating, "We should go down on our knees and pray for the nation, Ghana, because what is happening nowadays is not just real." Yeah, Mr. Bob Monday, let me ask you this. What are the gaps in the solutions that have been employed so far? What are the gaps?
So first of all, and you are speaking directly to this incident, the fact that the violence escalated already, you can describe that as a gap. But I will be the first to say that in less than 48 hours, the security agencies were able to hold the town. And again, let me not mention the names of other countries. Do you know that in another situation, the violence could have spiraled out of control and we could have had more loss of life? So people are looking at where were the security agencies, but they are forgetting that today, it's not intelligence that coordinates security. It is how community participation is able to provide the type of support to the security agencies. Be it as it may, when it escalated, they were able to hold the town in 48 hours. And as we speak, yes, unfortunate as it may be, people are not dying as a result of the violence.
But we get the impression that people are, the people have lost hope in our security apparatus and therefore are trying to use self-defense.
That could be a perception. But the worst thing for anybody to do is to assume that you can lose hope in the security agency, so you can, because then we are entering a phase of lawlessness in Ghana, and we don't want that. If there are challenges with our security agencies, and I have not said that there are no challenges, what we do is how do we support them to fill those gaps in order that they are a better security, so to speak, apparatus. And that's the way it functions. And there is no country in which the security agencies are 100% perfect.
Perfect. Yeah.
And I can say that on empirical,
of course,
yes.
Yeah.
I've gone in several countries and I have seen that at first hand. So what you do is you say that these are the challenges, how do we address them? But you do not say that I will take, like those people holding cutlasses, that is lawlessness. And in situations of emergency, when lives begin to be lost terribly, the security agencies, you see, they escalate the force to be able to subdue the violence in different stages. So at the stage that we saw, they were, in my view, very friendly. But depending on how it went up, they could have been deploying more force. And those people holding weapons could have been a target of the police suppression. And sometimes you have to do that because the choice is, do you allow the violence to escalate for 1,000 people to die? Or do you have collateral damage of 5 people to suppress the violence? And so I go back to the level of education that we need in this country for people to appreciate the role of the security and what we must do when that type of situation erupts. But having said that, mob action is like a drug. It makes people intoxicated. So because the young people see about 100 young people, you are, so to speak, covered in that mob to feel that you are protected. But it's very dangerous. And we need a lot of the peace education to let people know that when there's a problem, how we solve it is more important than what the problem itself tells us.
Talking about the youth, the young people, do
Yeah.
you think there's a correlation between the unemployment and this violence? Is there a correlation? I don't think we have done that study in Ghana, but...
No, if, let me put it this way. Those studies are available. If you look at the World Development Report of 2011, in which Ghana was cited, because the World Development Report took the indicator of unemployment and said unemployment can exacerbate social tensions. But then the report now indicates that countries like Ghana are putting institutions to be able to respond to that. And the difference is those countries that, and I even have all of it here, so because I made a print.
Where are they getting that information that we put in institutions to fight against that? Whereas you just said that Kenyans came and learned something from us and we are still marking time whilst the Kenyans are running.
Understandably, because our Peace Council was set up before DS. The difference between us and them. But don't forget that because of the violence, post-election violence of 2007, they understood why it was important to, so to speak, fast-track the implementation of their peace architecture. Now the question is, do we want in Ghana to wait until we see the level of violence that the Kenyans saw before we then rapidly make sure that our Peace Council is working? No.
But for instance, the Northern Region Minister is saying at least the conflicts in the North are political. We know you want to do a lot of work in the North. What do you think about that?
Let me put it this way. Some conflicts in Ghana have a political underpinning. The conflict is presented to you, for example, as traditional. But what is driving it? Because you must look at the driver and not just the substance. What is the root, the tap root that is driving it would be political. And yet it appears proximately as traditional. And so some of the conflicts, yes, in the northern part of Ghana, are driven by those undercurrents. And so he will be right in making that assessment. But it is not true that all the conflicts have that political undertone. I don't think Hohoi has that political undertone.
Can you talk about the model you have introduced in, WANEP has introduced in the North with the 14 hot spots, what we are doing? And
WANEP is coordinating West African civil society to interface with ECOWAS in producing what we call ECO1, which is the ECOWAS early warning and conflict prevention mechanism.
Okay.
We have now worked hard to begin to decentralize that at national levels. And in Ghana, we have what we call Ghana One. And our national network in Ghana, with a national network coordinator, is responsible for the day-to-day monitoring of the indicators that we have designed and we are monitoring to be able to engage on prevention. And we have quarterly review meetings with the security agencies to present to them our observations of what we are monitoring. And they appreciate where they see what we are seeing that they did not capture. And they also alert us to do more in areas that they think we should do more.
But you have 14. Is it fair to say we are adding to the hotspots now with Teshegu, Kumfi, and Hohwe now?
As I mentioned earlier, we chose those 14 because we are monitoring indicators that have a political leaning in an election year. To be specific, and you also know that the grand support was for elections.
I know our time is up. In one second, what is the way forward?
No, for me, the way forward is to ensure that the space for dialogue is expanded and that we have the capacity to be able to use dialogue to respond to problems. And we need to structure that much more than we have done. And we are beginning to do that through the Peace Council, but a lot of effort needs to go in it. There is a need for skill training, for technical expertise.
But how can the whole issue be resolved? How can we resolve the whole issue?
You are talking specifically about Hohoi?
No, it's not all these issues are popping up. Yes.
No, first of all, it's about the disposition of all of us to appreciate that there will be problems. But when a problem comes into a community, the way to resolve it is not to exacerbate that problem, but it is to allow the tolerance that is our value to create the space for us to be able to engage on the problem. And through dialogue, we will definitely improve on the situations. But let's not pretend that we can live as if we are in a situation in which there is no conflict. There will be conflict. It is part of our human character. But that's not the issue. The challenge is, how are we on top? how do we have the capacity to
to
respond to those issues?
Okay. Thank you very much for joining
Thank
us
you.
on PM Express.
Thank you.